Hey, everybody, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the Device Talks Weekly podcast. We are closing in on Device Talks Boston. As I'm sure you know, it's happening on May 10th and 11th. And as a warm-up, we're bringing you this episode of the podcast, which is sponsored by our friends at Dassault Systèmes. Dassault Systèmes will be presenting a conversation at Device Talks Boston called Patient Outcomes Driven Simulation. We'll talk about simulation, and it's part of a broader simulation theme at Device Talks Boston. And as we did last week, where we sort of previewed a conversation, we're doing that this week as well. We spoke with Claire Biot. She is Vice President of Life Sciences at Dassault Systèmes. She'll talk about Dassault Systèmes' virtual twin platform and how it's being used to develop products more quickly, more efficiently, to do it more sustainably because they're using fewer materials, and how they're able to both simulate product and patient response to products. So simulation is used in a variety of ways increasingly in medical device development, and Claire Biot will explain how Dassault Systèmes is contributing to that movement. Then later on, we'll hear from Jithesh Veetil. He is Senior Program Director of Digital Health and Technology at MDIC, also known as the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, and he'll explain how the industry can incorporate virtual twin technology simulation into product development. And we'll also have a link. We'll talk about MDIC's landscape report and industry survey on the use of computational modeling and simulation in medical device development. And we'll have a link to that report, that survey, in the show notes for this podcast. So thanks to Dassault Systèmes. Once again, they connected us with Claire Biot and Jithesh Veetil. But these are the interviews in their entirety. So before we begin, I want to remind you that Device Talks Tuesdays is happening. This is our final episode of the spring season. It's brought to you by Intertech, and it's called The Evolution of Home Healthcare and Medical Device Compliance. In this conversation, we'll really be looking at how end users interact with their medical devices. So as medical devices move out of the clinical health setting, what product developers need to do to make sure that the device is used properly. So once again, that one is sponsored by Intertech. You can register for that at DeviceTalks.com. You can watch that live or on demand. And of course, it's free, allows you to expand your knowledge and network. So make sure you register for Device Talks Tuesdays at DeviceTalks.com. All right, before we begin, I just want to remind you, Device Talks Boston, it's happening May 10th and 11th. If you want to save some money, use the code DTWeekly25. And you'll save 25% because, well, we just love our podcast listeners. All right, here we go. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well.
Getting over a bit of the sniffles, are you?
Yeah, exactly. But,
Yeah.
we're moving through spring, so looking forward to, getting more of that vitamin D and just, have a nice run. Good riddance to the winter and the cold season and all that.
There you go. That's the spirit.
Stuff.
That's the spirit. We're coming up. It's mid-April. We are less than 3 weeks removed from Device Talks Boston.
Yeah.
Hard to believe, but things are coming together quite nicely. Yeah.
Early May in Boston is beautiful.
It typically is. Yes, it typically is. We have a lovely day today. Temperatures in the high 50s, low 60s. Very sunny, and hopefully this will hold and stay true for the next one. Maybe warm up just a tad for the next for Device Talks Boston, which is happening May 10th and 11th. Program is filled out, looks great. Folks should go to DeviceTalks.com. Your editorial team, our friends and colleagues, have been posting aggressively on social media about all the speakers. So people, if you're not connected with
spreading the word,
Daniel Kerr, Sean Hooley, Jim Hammeran, Brian Bunce, find them all on LinkedIn if you want to see what's going on, or to go to DeviceTalks.com and check out the agenda yourself. But lots of buzz.
Are you going to be outside, maybe like Boston Scientific headquarters with a sandwich board, maybe, or like? You think
I could do that.
Yeah,
I should. You think?
Maybe get some merch.
I know what I'll do.
Get some merch, man. Get some swag.
I'm going to print up like 5,000 flyers, go in their parking lot, and just put it on each and every windshield. I think they would like that. I
You
think
might
I'll
get
do that.
arrested. Yeah. Might
No,
want
I think they'd appreciate my helping to spread the word.
to.
Everyone loves a
Yeah.
windshield flyer. Who doesn't love a windshield flyer?
Hey, Riot is
I
headed.
get in my
Put them on
car, I'm
the
about to drive, and
windshield.
there's a flyer in front of you. I'd love getting up and
Yeah,
checking out
thanks.
what liquor store is having a sale. It's
I would
fantastic.
love getting into my car and realizing there's a piece of paper on my windshield as I'm trying to drive through a parking lot.
It's
Sure, you'll
settled.
be beloved. You'll be beloved.
I'm going to hit every local medical device company with flyers in the parking lot. Prepare,
Boston
folks.
Sci, Logic. I'm going through them.
Going through them all. That'll be a good use of my time.
Heading over to Vicarious Surgical.
There you
Just
go.
gonna get them all.
Get J and
Oh, it's gonna
J.
be
There's Smith
go.
and nephew. There you go. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe we should get a Skyrider. What do you think? We could have them all at once with that.
Oh, you mean just like
You know,
so
Device
you
Talks
realize I
Boston.
don't have a pilot's license. I can't fly little.
Well, we would pay someone to
Cessna
do
or
it.
whatever.
Well, you could. I imagine if you did have a pilot license, your penmanship, skymanship would be a little rough. So we need a professional
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, you should get somebody like who does it usually with those propeller planes. Actually, it wouldn't be a Cessna. That's too fast.
The flying sign, the thing
Oh.
that they fly behind. Right. You can do that too. All right.
There
We
you
got
go.
lots of great ideas.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who
we
needs
got
LinkedIn?
this.
We're gonna go old school with this promotion.
That's right. Got
Yeah.
the sandwich boards. Got the plane with the banner.
The flyers. We're good. We're good.
Just fly that over a Red Sox game. It'll be great. It'll be awesome, man.
Oh, I missed the marathon. I missed that opportunity. All right, next
Oh yeah,
year.
you could have done the marathon. Yeah.
I could have done the marathon. All right. Well, lots of
Oh.
good ideas. I think we've stormed enough of our brains. I think we should probably get into your vaunted award-winning
Yes.
should be
The
new
new
markers
markers.
newsmakers list. We got to win
The
you an
new
award,
markers,
Chris.
newsmakers.
What kind of award can we win for you? We got to create some kind of association that gives awards for news roundups, and then we can give you the
I
first
love
award.
it.
Okay, we'll do that.
I love it. Or maybe we could lobby the ASBs at least to have a like newsletter award, something like that category. I think
Podcast News Roundup Award. Yes. Yeah. Sounds good.
love it. I think
All right.
we got it. We're rocking this.
Man,
We
we
got
are
this
just
going.
killing this podcast. There's so
I
many
know.
good ideas flowing. I hope no one's writing this
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, right.
Stealing our
Did we
ideas.
slow down for? Yeah, okay. All right. Number 5
Number
on the
5.
list. Yeah, people are busy right now. We gotta get
They
moving.
gotta go.
Yeah.
Enough of your idiocy, Tom.
None of the
Let
clowning
Chris
around.
talk.
Okay, so we had we're gonna start out with some good news for the week. We got
That's great.
Intuitive had a really good Q1 earnings report. They set their stock up 12%, when they released the results earlier this week, and street beating. They've got the installations for DaVinci are heading up again. Interestingly enough, there was some talk on their earnings call about how they're making better cases to health providers about, even though this is like a large capital expenditure, kind of the information on, how, this system can improve their efficiencies and improve results and save money, and so I think that's a really good case of, even though, health providers are having, operational challenges, and they're kind of, thinking about, do we want to make some large capital purchases actually, that if, you can really make a good economic case, you can boost things up. And Intuitive added, a few hundred, new people to its headcount, in the first quarter as well. So, even though there's been a lot of tough news lately, right? About,
we'll get to that.
companies
We'll get to
laying
that a little
off.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's on the way. But there's companies that are, being scrappy, being innovative, and they're hiring, to grow through whatever we're working our way through right now economically. So that's here's to Intuitive on that. And I actually just got a quick email from from a official over at AtriCure here around the Twin Cities, and they have nearly 80 open positions listed on their website. So
Wow.
yeah,
No,
so
there's
people-
definitely opportunities out there.
there are opportunities.
As we've talked about before, the shock is there. Folks are hurt, but they should take the time to rest, I think, first, assess.
Yeah.
And then I think there's as we saw on LinkedIn, and I made a note of it yesterday on LinkedIn, lots of people are posting comments of support. Let me know if we can help. We're hiring over here, to my former colleagues. I think it's great. It's great that people are stepping up and doing that.
Here in Minnesota, the Medical Alley Association, they've revamped, got a new souped up job board. So
that's great.
They got special membership, if you're in between jobs. So
and
yeah,
I hope folks will find a safe bridge to the other side. So two points. We'll get into the layoff stuff a little bit about Intuitive. Your point about sort of the data and the importance of that is interesting. And I wonder when we're going to get to the point where we're not talking so much about a surgical robotic system. We're kind of de-emphasizing the robotics and talking more about the data analysis and all that's gone into it. I mean, that's sort of what Gary Guthart talked a lot about at DeviceTalks West last year. It's what Intuitive talks a lot about. It's what Robert Cohen talked about in a podcast and Stryker talks earlier this year. The data. We'll talk about that at DeviceTalks Boston on our keynote panel on day 2, May 11th. But are we going to get to a point where we're not calling these surgical systems anymore? I mean, robotic systems anymore. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see when that happens.
I mean, I don't see people going around saying like, "I have cruise control on my car." It's something you usually expect if you buy a vehicle. I can now we've got like even more souped up things. Tesla. There's some people who try to let their Teslas drive on their own. Like, okay, but I mean, I think it's I remember, what did Gotthard say at DeviceTalks West, like 10 years maybe, but I don't know, it could be sooner. I mean, it could become like in just a few years, like this accepted thing that in a lot of cases when you go in for a surgery that there's going to be something robotic involved, helping the surgeon to perform the procedure. It's just going to be a given.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah. It reminds me when I was in journalism, we had when I was at J school, actually getting out of J school, then the class that they were just starting the next year was computer assisted reporting. So this was like,
I remember that. Yeah, computer assisted. You even have like,
now it's like that's reporting. Like, can you imagine doing this job? Yeah, without a computer. So
I look up data online that helps me, like report on something.
We could have a whole conversation about the Chat GPT stuff. That's the Slack channel that Brian Bunce is leading up. Is just fascinating.
Our farm editor Brian Bunce has been,
and Kayleen Brown, who I forgot to mention earlier, Kayleen Brown on our DeviceTalk staff, really finding some unique. And I've been actually starting to engage with it a bit, just to kind of soup up my LinkedIn posts a little bit. Hey, make this tighter. Hey, make this shorter. It's really intriguing.
It can do so many different things.
Second point about Intuitive, and we'll go on. But it just there's at some point where you wonder, like, is their lead insurmountable? Like, they're crushing it.
Really true.
They're absolutely crushing it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm hoping, I want Medtronic to succeed. I want J&J to succeed. I want all these other entities to come out with their lines. But at some point, it's like, wow, they're just crushing it. They're placing lots of systems. I know there's a lot more room to go. So, maybe it's like saying, Ford was crushing it, so why should we have any other car companies? I don't know. But man, they're just doing really well.
Oh no, I mean, even just the earlier this month, I mean, I was reading one note out from BTIG about, Medtronic, and they're like, it was tough. I mean, they were like, we went and we tried out the Hugo system, and they didn't see, they wondered whether it really differentiated that enough from what Intuitive did. I mean, they're kind of like, Medtronic could get into some outside the US markets well with it, but they were wondering really like how much, because Intuitive really has entrenched itself so well over the last few decades. I mean, I suspect if you're going to compete, you better have something that's really like different or a niche or, or something like, we talk about a company like Moon Surgical. Oh, it's a robotic surgical assistant, something that's, that's making like a different play.
Vicarious, which is, putting all the arms basically inside the body and kind of requiring fewer openings. Just say, perhaps, I imagine that would make it a simpler procedure. I'm not a surgeon, but
on the flip side, I could see like a huge company like Medtronic or Johnson & Johnson. I mean, you're making all these surgical tools, and a robot is this really important thing. You could have all these tools being sold around. I mean, in the ortho space, I mean, Stryker's had a lot of success with Mako on that.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, it's you got to compete.
But Stryker bought a company. They bought a system that was mostly complete and they just kind of built off of that. Maybe that's something we'll see more of. But
Yeah,
anyway,
we'll see.
Let's roll into number 4, Chris Newmarker. What's
Okay.
number 4 in the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Hey, so number 4 on the list, we've got this was actually from the end of last week. We have a company, Neuromod, devices. They closed on a $33 million raise to support a tinnitus. I think that's how I pronounce it, tinnitus
I
treatment
say
device.
tinnitus, but
Tinnitus. Okay, tinnitus.
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So just
Let me check.
so kind of like another one of these like kind of cool non-invasive neuromodulation devices. I mean, I just think we're just going to see more and more of these.
Oh, you're right. Tinnitus.
It is tinnitus.
Tinnitus.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Sorry.
It's great.
Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
I was right, Tom. I was
You
right.
were right. I'll ask ChatGPT. How do you pronounce tinnitus? All right.
There you
Tinnitus. Well, I've learned something. Let's move on.
Yes, you learn on. But anyway, non-invasive device. I mean, it's another one of these devices sending electrical pulses to the tongue, to treat something with sounds played through headphones at the same time. But this has FDA de novo approval, and right now it has availability throughout Europe. So
That's great.
yeah, we need to see.
There's been a lot of device interest in tinnitus. Now that I can say it, I'm going to say it a lot. And I can't imagine suffering from that. So that's fantastic that people are developing ways to minimize it.
I know Brian, our farm editor, had a lot of attention a year or two ago because he was, parsing through, like that was one potential side effect from, COVID vaccines was getting tinnitus. Though at the same time, if you got COVID, you could get tinnitus. So, I don't think I'd worry about tinnitus when it comes to getting a COVID vaccine. Like,
I didn't hear that was a side effect of either. Wow.
Yeah.
That would stink.
Yeah.
Well, Claire Biot, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to learn about the virtual twin technology or the capabilities that Dassault is offering. So I guess we should just start at the top. I mean, it's an interesting term, virtual twin. What does it mean, and what are the key components of a virtual twin?
So I'll come to your question in a minute, but I would like to start with the why. Why do we care about that? And for us at Dassault Systèmes, I mean, we have been transforming manufacturing industries for 40 years. And why do we care so much about healthcare? Well, we think it's really timely because, only half of the worldwide population has access to essential healthcare. We see that healthcare expenses grow twice faster than GDP, and yet the healthy life expectancy hasn't progressed much in developed countries. And so for us at Dassault Systèmes, why do we wake up every morning? Well, we want to help increase the healthy life expectancy for individuals with sustainable healthcare systems. And to achieve that objective, we put virtual twins at the core of our strategy. And here comes your question. Why?
I might have another one though. Hold on. But yeah, no, let's get into what it is first so we're all on the same page.
So if I try to provide you with a definition, for me, a virtual twin is a common referential that is built and shared by different disciplines who collaborate on a project as a way to share knowledge and know-how. And because they share that common referential, they can ask what-if questions, what-if scenarios, so that they can optimize that project. So in other words, virtual twins, which are actually building virtual worlds, help anticipate and evaluate the impact of a product or an action before it actually happens. And it also helps people imagine and collaborate differently. And you're mute.
So this is an audio format. People are listening to this. What should they be thinking in their head when we say virtual twin? Is it merely a computer program on a spreadsheet somewhere? Is it an actual device? What are we speaking of?
It's a great question. Actually, it can take many forms, and it can be one dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4. So let me give you a few examples. I think for healthcare, what we need at most is the virtual twin of the patient as a way to better understand diseases, test different treatment options, predict treatment outcomes. And that virtual twin of the patient itself can be the 3D model of an organ that will contain the physics. And I know we're going to drill down more into this later. It can be a 1 or 2D view of the patient through, for example, a synthetic control arm, which would be what is the response profile of a patient to a given therapy. So really, the shape that the virtual twin is going to take depends on the question you're asking. And importantly, the ability to navigate from one virtual twin experience to the other, to navigate seamlessly, to connect different virtual twin experiences together is going to unlock additional value. so that, for example, the virtual twin of the product is going to fit for the patient, or the virtual twin of the plant is going to fit with the product that you're planning to produce.
Interesting. So what are the key benefits of the virtual twin? Is it speed? I imagine speed is one. I imagine ease is one. There probably are others as well.
I'd say speed for sure. I'll come back to that in a minute. Costs, I would say sustainability as well, and ethics as well. And so if I comment on each of them, what we see in the field of medical device engineering, is really the willingness to accelerate development cycles. And for us, it's going to go through the fail cheap, fail fast process. And so the idea is, if you can democratize the use of the access to virtual twins, then you can really accelerate the project lifecycle. And we have reported KPIs with some customers of cutting, the timelines by 40%, 40. Obviously, reducing costs, because you're going to reduce the need for physical prototyping, is important. And we have been able to report replacement of up to 90%, 90, of physical prototyping. And by reducing that physical prototyping, not only do you reduce costs, but you're going to also increase your sustainability index, because you're not going to waste raw material.
Interesting.
And the last item that I wanted to comment on is ethics. If you can reduce the need for physical testing, then you can reduce the need for animal testing. And the ultimate goal is also to reduce the need for patient testing by embracing in silico clinical trials.
So that kind of goes into my next question. When, maybe we can get into some examples as to how it's used, but when can this technology be brought in? Is it at the very start when someone comes up with an idea, or, hey, how about this? And then you run it through to see if it works? Or has the product already been developed, it's capable of doing what it's capable of doing, and now we're at the testing stage?
So it depends on the types of virtual twins. I'd say virtual twins of products, they are used quite commonly, but I think that there is yet room for acceleration. I'll come back to that in a moment. And I would say that the adoption of virtual twins of humans is more at the beginning, but we have promising examples. So let me comment on a few. I was talking about acceleration of the project lifecycle. I can name one pharma company which requires connected injectors for their drugs. And so for them, the question was, how can I accelerate my development cycle? And they realized that most of their projects would fail in the late stages, and that there was a bottleneck with their simulation experts. So designers would change the shape of the connected pen, and then they would log requirements for the simulation experts to run through. And it would take a week for the simulation experts to do the work, come back with a report, and you would iterate that way. And so it's very cumbersome. And the question they came to us with was, can you help us standardize the way we're going to use virtual twins so that we can automatize some of the simulations and from there democratize the use of simulation? And so really the idea is to shift the curve to the left and fail faster and cheaper. And they have been able to report, for example, drop tests from 5 hours, it would take 5 minutes, mold injections from 2 days into 2 hours. So you really see a shift by a log in terms of the timelines. And if you put all these steps in the project cycle together, it leads to an overall reduction of 40% in the timeline. So that's one example. Another example is, can I open a new factory faster? So I now I know what product I need to produce, and either it's a new product that I am going to bring to market, or it's a device that is already on the market and there is increasing demand and I need to open a new manufacturing line. So here the question is, can I build a virtual twin of the line or the virtual twin of the factory as a way to accelerate the opening of that new line? And we have been able to report, acceleration of the opening of a new line by 2 months out of 8 months. If you think about products that would bring tens of millions of dollars per month, then that's quite a lot of savings. And then the last example would maybe be more on the patient experience. I wanted to speak about Vortex, which is a project that we have run with our 3D Experience Lab, which is a program for breakthrough innovation with a radiotherapy institute. And here the question we wanted to raise was really focused on the patient experience, which is, okay, as a cancer like many cancer patients will go through radiotherapy, and it often takes 4 to 5 weeks between the time when the patient is going to be diagnosed to the start of therapy. And the patient is told, you're going to be tattooed as a way for us to align you on the machine and make sure that the X-ray is going to target the tumor, but not your healthy cells. So you're going to be asked not to move on the tray. And so it's like the patient is going to spend 4 to 5 weeks in a high level of anxiety, thinking about the experience they're going to go through. And so we have built a virtual reality experience for the patients so that as soon as they're diagnosed, they can experience what a radiotherapy will be about. They will be laying down with the machine that comes on top of their head. They will see that the machine is shooting to the left, to the right, etc. And they will learn what it feels like. And so our question is, okay, if we consider that this is going to improve the experience for the patient, can we demonstrate it? And so we have launched a clinical trial. It is supported by Medidata Solutions as a way to quantify the impact on the level of anxiety for the patient.
Wow. Well, that's an interesting sort of place to ask this question. How did Dassault System ensure that the twins represent the real world systems that they're modeling? I mean, having the anxiety kind of injected in there kind of adds a whole new element to it. How do you measure information from all these different sources?
It really depends on the virtual twin that you're going to build. And here, again, maybe I can take 3 examples. Actually, I realized we have gone all that far in the podcast without me mentioning our Living Heart project, which has really been a foundational project. So I can say a few words and tell you what kind of data fits into that project. So the Living Heart is a virtual twin of the heart, which is going to be scientifically rooted in different kinds of physics. So the geometry is right. So we take a CT scan to have the shape of the heart. We have the orientations of the fibers. Then you're going to reproduce the behavior of the heart, which is a pump, right? It's an electromechanical behavior. The pump is going to contract under an electrical signal. And then we're going to be able to reproduce the blood flow, which is hemodynamics. And so in that case, the living heart, the kind of data that fit the model would be several folds, but we have been collaborating with a broad ecosystem, 100 participants across the entire world, including cardiac surgeons, cardiologists, medical device developers, regulators, academic researchers. And so we have been feeding in the model a lot of publications with equations from physics, like laws of hemodynamics, for example, that make sure that we have deep scientific roots in that model. And then, of course, the need is to parameterize the model so that you can have a personalized model for a patient. And here, the data that would fit into the twin in order to personalize the model would be patient data, so images, CT scan, MRI, and that would allow us to fine-tune the model. So that's the first example I wanted to comment. I can add 2 others more briefly. You know that a lot of medical devices are connected devices. So there is a lot of questions about battery life cycle. We are able to build virtual twins of batteries as a way to make sure that we understand the behavior and we can improve the longevity of the batteries. And in that case, the idea is, of course, we're going to start with the physical laws. We can go all the way down to quantum mechanics. And then we're going to test some hypotheses at the bench and make sure that we call that V plus R, virtual plus real, so that the data collected at the lab are going to feed into the model and improve reliability of that model. So that was example number 2. If I take a third one to show you the diversity of data that can feed a virtual twin, I was talking about sustainability earlier. When you develop a new product, a medical device, and it can apply to other industries within Dassault Systèmes as well, of course, you want to make sure that the materials that come into play in that device are going to be as sustainable as possible from their own impact and, of course, from their scope 3, which would be all the supply chain that's going to be involved to source the raw material. And so we are able to feed our 3D Experience platform with the largest database in the world, which is named EcoInvent, that's going to come with the footprint of raw materials as a way to help engineers optimize the raw materials that will come into the design of a medical device. That's a third example with different types of data feeding to the twin.
Wow. And I imagine that, does AI and machine learning come into play? It must be very helpful in managing all this information.
Yeah, of course. So the idea, I was talking about batteries earlier. You get data from the lab. Can you train algorithms so that they're going to do agile loops from the in silico models to generating, candidates that would be meaningful? We do that. We call that generative generative design. Can apply to batteries in material science. It can also apply to therapeutics. That's further away from medical devices, but that's important for our biopharma customers. And I can also provide you with an example of the use of AI for the virtual twin of patients. I was talking about imaging from the patient and the ability to build personalized models. And so obviously AI can come into play as a way to accelerate reconstruction of the personalized twin from the patient images to the virtual twin. That's another example of the use of AI.
Interesting. This is life sciences, medical devices. Data analysis is meaningless without sort of syncing up with the regulatory bodies that give the green lights for these products. Whereas the FDA and other regulatory bodies you're working with, how do they view the virtual twin technology?
So there is a lot of interest from FDA. We actually have had a long-lasting partnership with FDA on virtual twins. And so I want to comment on one, which is we have called the Enrichment Project. And so that's a project we announced in 2019 and for which we're about to release in a few months from now a playbook, which will be co-authored by FDA and Dassault Systèmes. And so the question we wanted to ask is, okay, now that we have this living heart model, can we use the living heart model as a way to generate a library, a cohort of virtual patients to run an in silico clinical trial? And so we have chosen the mitral valve regurgitation as a disease model. And the idea is, can we validate a repair device in that cohort of virtual patients as a way to limit the number of real patients that will have to go through a clinical trial? And so, of course, this has to obey to the guidelines that FDA has released in terms of modeling and the use of modeling and simulation in medical device engineering. And that's what we have been doing over the past 4 years.
Wow. So if you're getting a positive indication from the regulatory bodies you review, the benefits for sustainability, ethics, and speed, I mean, it would seem to be a very compelling argument for virtual twin technology. How many companies are you working with right now? And do you have a projection or a hope of what you see happening in the next 5 years or so?
Of course, it's always difficult to predict the future. So we, first and foremost, we already have, tens of thousands of customers in the medical device industry that we collaborate with. Not all of them would build, virtual twins of humans, but all of them are working on models and virtual twins of products, which means that there is really room for rapid expansion. And so for us, really what's going to change in the next 5 years is the way care is going to be delivered. And so today, when you think about the patients, a lot of data is gathered from the patient, but this data is not contextualized. And so for us in the next 5 years, accessing virtual twins or the ability to build virtual twins is really going to help the patient data in context so that it's going to help with a clinical decision. So I would say that's the major shift that we're expecting and on which we're preparing with our customers.
Wow. To any companies listening to this interview, what advice do you give when you're talking to a company about this and they're expressing interest? What sort of advice do you give to them, whether or not they should use the virtual twin?
So I'd say first, we share the same passion, and I think we share the same goal. And I would tell them, if you're considering the concept of the virtual twin, but you're cautious to get started because it's a heavily regulated industry, I would suggest you challenge yourself and you challenge your status quo. Look at what we're doing with FDA. I've been talking about FDA Enrichment Project. I could also name the synthetic control arms that we're building and that have, already seen a tremendous success on the biopharma side. And so I'd say, of course, all of you are engaged in digital initiatives. I would encourage you to move from digital to virtual and make sure that you're going to, leverage virtual worlds as a way to extend and improve the real world.
Great. Fantastic. Well, it's kind of mind-blowing to hear about all that's gone on, especially with the Living Heart program and where you're headed. I'm excited to hear about your progress in the future. Thanks for taking a few minutes to share what you're up to with Virtual Twin.
My pleasure. Thanks for the interview.
All right, Chris Newmarker, let us roll on to number 3 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers.
Number 3 on the list, we've got the CEO of LivaNova resigning effective immediately, and with the board chair assuming an interim CEO responsibilities over at the company. Interestingly enough, at the same time that Damien McDonald was resigning, they also released some preliminary first quarter revenue numbers that showed surpassing what the Wall Street consensus was. So, but I noticed Mike Matson over at Needham and Company was, noting, he was saying like there was, several, pipeline disappointments at LivaNova. So, it sounds like the board just decided they, needed to try something new over there.
Yeah, and as you quoted Mike Matson, who has been on the podcast, or you paraphrased, a new CEO could pare back expenses involving pipeline initiatives, engage in additional cost reductions in administration and sales, and perhaps even sell the company to a strategic or private equity. So
yeah, I even brought that
everything's
up.
on the table, I guess.
Sounds like everything's on the table. So
yeah, okay, we'll watch that story develop.
And for those who don't know, LivaNova is a cardiac surgery and neuromodulation device company based out of London.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Chris Newmark, bring us on to number 2 on the Newmark.
Number 2 on the list, Johnson & Johnson. I mean, we've reported a bit on how there've been, layoffs over there as they're, trying to, reduce expenses. But, J&J is, they actually had a good street beating first quarter, including with their medtech business. Like the J&J medtech revenues were up 6.4% year over year. And there was a lot of talk about electrophysiology products during the earnings call, including with the head of J&J MedTech, Ashley McAvoy, saying that they really think they've got a winning combo with this idea that, you have a system that, pairs RF ablation with this, with the new pulse field ablation. You can kind of toggle between those two, and something Medtronic's going at as well, through their the technology they got from Affera. But it seems to be like when you're looking at what's exciting around the space, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of excitement that, they're going to, boost the way they, like AFib is treated through ablation. So it's going to be exciting to see where this goes.
Absolutely. No, for sure. A lot of new companies there, a lot of new startups. And we'll have Tim Lasky from Medtronic talking about how nitinol is being used in their system at DeviceTalks Boston. And I know J&J was eager to talk about their cardiac ablation business as well. So maybe we'll try to get them at DeviceTalks West. That would be great.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. And there was robot news in the J&J call as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was. I mean, because they it was, it was kind of it definitely was a kind of a question mark, like what's going to be next with what they're trying to do, when it comes to competing with Intuitive. I mean, they had some, layoffs with their, robotic surgery, teams in California, but they said they're moving forward on their Atava robot, and, there'll be, expect news out about what's next with that, in the second half of the year. So we'll keep our ears out for it, keep, listen, keep trying to follow that. That'll be great.
Well, you know what I'm going to say, right, Chris Newmarker?
What are you going to say?
If you want to hear directly what's going on in J&J's robotic system, we'll have more robotics business. We'll have Martin Buehler, who's the global head of robotics R&D. He's actually the keynote speaker at our Healthcare Robotics Engineering Forum, which is also happening on May 10th and 11th at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. But it's synced it's right next door to DeviceTalks Boston. So you have a choice of listening to a great presentation by Boston Scientific. Megan Scanlon and others will be talking about their LithoView system.
Fantastic.
Or you can head on over to Healthcare Robotics Engineering Forum and hear from Martin Buehler, the global head of robotics R&D at Johnson & Johnson.
Fantastic.
MedTech. And we did not pick these stories to promote DeviceTalks Boston. We just have a lot of stuff going on. We're going to be talking about almost everything.
So we can get a better idea of what's next just in a few weeks, at the show. So that'll be fantastic.
Making some news of our own, my friend.
That's right.
All right, Chris Newmarker. Sad number 1. Bring on the number 1 Newmarker.
Yeah, I mean, number 1, we've big question, like a lot of talk about significant expense reductions in Medtronic, and this week, the email, went out, across Medtronic from CEO Jeff Martha that, they've layoffs have begun in earnest over there, and Martha was saying this is going to be a month-long process, and global. So we'll just keep on following this, and here's here's to hoping that, this can, Medtronic can have, some better days going forward. But, as we said, though there are companies hiring, there are opportunities around there. So
yeah, and I think this is something that had been anticipated. And I think it last week's number 1, which is about the 50 or so positions in California. I think we were sort of looking for indications of what we've been hearing about layoffs, and this kind of cemented the rumors and the speculation that there'd be layoffs at Medtronic. I know we've heard of some people cut this week. We've seen it on LinkedIn. We know people personally who have been let go. So it's almost every company or many companies out there are going through it, unfortunately. And as we said at the top, hopefully those folks will find other opportunities in medical devices, because there are a lot of companies hiring. So maybe this will bring new talent to those other businesses. That'll bring new ideas and re-energize the sector as a whole. So we can hope for the best.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of how, IBM still in the past had like a lot of jobs down in southern Minnesota, and as they pare down those jobs, I mean, there's actually people I've met across the the Twin Cities who are involved in medtech who've got IBM roots. I mean, it kind of seeded the whole industry with people who had like kind of like computing talent.
Sure.
Even though we're seeing like these cuts over at Medtronic, which are really tough. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be kind of like a more of a former Medtronic. I mean, I think there already is a tad, but you're going to see more of a former, maybe a little bit more of like a former Medtronic club around, all the, around all the like younger, smaller companies, like, people they brought on, from this. So, and, Medtronic, I mean, there's some exciting things going on over there, including like pulse field ablation right there at the top of my head. Something that could be really good over there. They're doing some cool stuff in the spine space. So yeah, we'll see.
Yep.
See how it goes.
Rental Innovation is one we'll keep an eye on. Obviously, a lot of growth in the spine space. Yeah.
I mean, that's that's kind of. I mean, that seems to be the story seems to be that. I mean, in general, it's more expensive right now to run a business. But Medtronic also had some things that in the past they were saying were going to be big things for them, like renal denervation and surgical robotics, and it's taking longer for that to really pan out for them. But as I said, there's other opportunities, so we'll see where it goes. Hopefully, diabetes. Hopefully that can they've been working through like a really tough warning letter from FDA over diabetes. Hopefully, but they say they've answered a lot of FDA questions around it now at this point. So hopefully that they can get that kind of turned around, because that's an exciting space.
We're hoping to have, expecting to have Q Delara, the head of diabetes, on the next Medtronic Talks podcast.
It'd be fantastic.
We'll get an update there.
Here we go.
All right, Chris Newmarker, a very complete list. Great job on the newsmakers.
Sounds great, Tom.
Well, Jithesh Veetil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I actually never spoken with someone at MDIC, and that sounds ridiculous given that I've been talking about the industry for so long. Give us a little bit of background, if you would, before we get into the topic, what MDIC is, its mission and its role.
So MDIC, the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, is a non-profit public-private partnership. We have stakeholders from medical device manufacturers, FDA, and other regulatory bodies like MHRA, Center for Medicare and Medicare Services, and patient advocacy groups and our patients and other nonprofit organizations. So we are a consortium with organizations being our member. And at the onset, I wanted to make it clear that MDIC, even though it's a consortium, we don't focus on advocacy or lobbying or policy. What we focus is purely on the regulatory science portion for the medical device stakeholders. So here is what I can explain. Now there are other trade associations who work on policy. Now policy means whether it's from industry point or FDA point, there is it's a long process, right? You need to change the laws, change the guidance, and so on. It's a long process. What can we do right now within the existing regulatory framework, whether it is industry or FDA? Come together, think about the challenges, and find creative solutions to advance the medical device sector. When I say device, diagnostics is included, imaging is included in that, everything which is coming under in case of US FDA CDRH. That's what we do. So for the past 10 years, we have been addressing different challenges that industry is facing or FDA is facing across the total product life cycle, bringing stakeholders to this platform in a pre-competitive space so that there is, you're not targeting one specific industry or a specific case, but rather the common challenges industries faced, and then coming up with the consensus-based solutions. So you have a lot of frameworks, a lot of templates, and so on, which industry can utilize. And when I say industry, you don't have to be MDIC member to utilize all these resources we put out. So that's the beauty of MDIC. Suggest anybody who is not familiar with MDIC, just visit mdic.org and take a quick look and see whether immediately the resources might be valuable for you. It is appropriate to consider your organization being an MDIC member.
So are you providing the data or the facts to sort of buttress the arguments or lobbying that others might be making, or are you also engaging with the regulatory bodies and trying to affect change directly?
So change directly, that might be a better way to say, because let's assume we have already an existing guidance, but industries are still trying to figure out how we can, satisfy that requirement, or there are new technologies and new challenges. Challenges, for example, in digital health, which is one of my programmatic areas at MDIC, there are a lot of uncertainties. Guidances are yet to be made available. So the companies are already developing all these, innovative products, which are, there are patients who are in need of these technologies or these treatments, right? So how can, as an industry together, along with FDA or other regulatory bodies, come together and figure out in the current statute or current regulatory framework, how can we do things better, faster, safer, and so on? So that's what we do. In some cases, we end up with best practices, which will be very complementary to particular guidance from FDA. Or in some cases, we'll be providing some kind of template, how to do early feasibility study, or how to do the budgeting or contracting, and so on. So these are all going to be really useful resource either for FDA employees or for the industry stakeholders,
Okay.
To do things better, faster, safer, or in effective fashion.
Great. So that work sort of ties us into the conversation we're having today. You've put out a landscape report, an industry survey that looks at the use of computational modeling and simulation in medical device development. So tell us about that report, and then maybe we can talk about how does CMS or CM and S support device development?
Yeah, I think maybe I should start with one specific, situation and explain for the audience the beauty of modeling and simulation. Now, anybody who is familiar with how drugs or devices are coming to market, it doesn't matter whether it is USA or elsewhere, you have a main component of clinical trials, right? Now, clinical trials means, finding the designing the study, finding the appropriate patient population, and there's a whole lot of process, Now, that means it's a slow, methodical, costly process, very complicated process to do clinical trials, whether it is device or diagnostics or drugs. Now, there are rules and regulations, clinical trials are vital, to prove the safety and effectiveness of a drug or a device. Can we do it slightly differently? Can we use, technology or innovations to do clinical trials slightly differently? That's one example for modeling and simulation. So we did a project, MDIC did a project in 2015-2016 period, along with industry and FDA, and of course, certain academic partners were also involved. So here is the scenario. Can we do a clinical trial? Let's assume that clinical trial was conducted with 100 people usually. What about if you do that same trial with 70 people and then submit the data to the regulatory bodies with 30 additional data points, but that remaining 30 coming from computational modeling and simulation. So you have now, as a net result, you have 70 plus 30 from modeling and simulation. So the net 100 is maintained. So that means you are not sacrificing the power of the clinical trial, but you are saving considerable amount of time and cost by reducing the number of actual patients exposed in that clinical trial, and having the modeling and simulation complement that remaining 30 without sacrificing the power of clinical trial. We call that as a virtual patient study. And to do that, you need multiple, components, right? For example, this is a new approach. So we need a buy-in from stakeholders, industry experts, as well as regulatory bodies like FDA. So we brought everybody together, created a case study, which we can, using modeling and simulation, we can simulate in cardiovascular space. That's what the example we developed at that point of time. We also did, once you have a study, you need to do submission to FDA, right, in the real studies. But in this case, what we did is we did a mock submission with FDA. That means the device study group had FDA employees. Now, the submission, when we did the submission to review the submission, we had FDA employees too, but they're not the same group of people, which was kind of blinded. But we did as if we were doing a real submission with our consensus-based approach. And in that process, we learned, okay, are we in the right track? Can this pass through the existing regulatory burden or regulatory framework with FDA or other regulatory bodies? And all those communications and feedback has been converted into public-facing documents and shared. Now, of course, it was in 2016-2017 period by the time we finish it. All these learnings now other manufacturers are utilizing for their particular cases. So we did one study in cardiovascular space. Now other companies are using it for diabetes and other cases where they are significantly able to reduce the cost of actual clinical trial and expose less number of patients, actual subjects to a clinical trial, and still make sure that the trials are done without sacrificing the power of actual trial. This is one specific case study. So, of course, when I said this study was done in 2016-17 period, we didn't end there. Now we are partnering with Dassault Systèmes and FDA for an in silico clinical trial project, which is kind of a next level on what virtual patient project we did previously. We're still working with industry stakeholders to make sure that they're adopting these new out-of-the-box methodologies to advance the field using modeling and simulation.
What is it about diabetes space, and I think you said the cardio space, what qualities do they have that make it a place to implement computer modeling?
In fact, modeling and simulation can be utilized in almost all the fields, I would say. The reason we selected cardiovascular space for our first case study was, one is that field seemed a little more mature in terms of availability of models and data, and the availability of subject matter experts and so on. And then cardiovascular space in some of the clinical trials are really hard. And then, for example, considering a diversity of the population, whether it is age and, race and many other factors. And again, doing clinical trials is extremely hard. At that point of time, we had availability of enough interested stakeholders and subject matter experts to do this first of its kind study. Now, I mentioned about the Living Heart project, which is in collaboration with the Dassault Systèmes. Again, when we have a model of a reasonably mature model of a living heart, it's easier to conduct studies in that space compared to a field where we have to develop new models and new expertise.
Interesting. So what were some of the surprises the report and the survey sort of presented?
Yeah, I wouldn't say surprises, because since MDIC has been monitoring the modeling and simulation field for the medical device from 2013, 2014, I can say we are monitoring the trend. So nothing really surprising. But some of the key takeaways are the industry now more and more recognizes the fact that regulatory bodies like FDA are willing to act CMS as a computational modeling and simulation as an evidence. That proportion has been increased when we compared 2014 survey with the 2021 survey. Now, we also found that more and more companies or manufacturers are utilizing modeling and simulation in their total product lifecycle, whether in multiple phases of the product development. But even though I said they are utilizing the modeling and simulation in their pipeline, that's not getting translated into the actual regulatory submission. Maybe if I say, if there are 100 manufacturers reported that they are utilizing modeling and simulation in their pipeline across the product lifecycle, only 50% of that actually utilized those modeling and simulation in a regulatory submission. So there is still a gap. That's partially due to the uncertainty about modeling simulation or regulatory uncertainties, how to utilize and how to proceed. That has been a challenge. Now, I also should mention in the survey, we have seen more and more for manufacturers stating that now we are more familiar with FDA guidance and guidance documents. Thankful for the additional documentation provided by FDA, whether it has a actual guidance or white papers or other additional resources or some of the tools that FDA has been providing, like MDDTs and so on. There are other standards like ANSI VNV40 standard, which is available now. So the field is evolving, but again, I would say that adoption is not at par with probably if you consider with automotive industry or aerospace industry. We're still lagging.
What are the barriers to entry? Why are it seems as if this would be a very attractive option for companies to save money and presumably time as well. What's holding them back?
Yeah. So the first and foremost, what we heard through the survey was the regulatory uncertainties. That's one key component. Regulatory bodies, whether it is FDA or other agencies across the world, now they are working in a more concerted fashion to harmonize some of these concepts. So that's changing. But overall, I would say that there are clear messages from regulatory bodies that bring it on, whether it is as a pre-submission or a Q submission or additional discussion. But then there are other challenges. One significant thing is we still lack expertise internally with the manufacturers. Now, in our survey is slightly biased towards larger manufacturers with more than $1 billion annual revenue, but we still found that the internal resources in terms of modeling and simulation is not at par. And then in many cases, lack of adequate infrastructure in terms of whether it is validated data or uncertainty about the parameters and so on. So there are some missing pieces in the actual implementation, actual modeling and simulation itself. So that needs to be overcome. And then even though I say cost saving, again, depending upon the case in hand, the cost can be a significant consideration. In one case or in one scenario, I would say some of the modeling software or resources provided by third-party providers like Dassault Systèmes or other cloud computing companies, you can start with zero, initial investment. It will be like opening an email account, right? There is no initial investment. The cost will be based on the actual utilization of the specific software or platform. But then cost can significantly jump. Let's assume if you're trying to simulate individual patients with a lot of complexities, those needs very high computing power. And some of those can take multiple days in terms of actual computing. So that can really be a consideration in certain cases. So again, there is a business case need to be defined in certain cases. In certain cases, it's like a cultural thing for the company. We haven't used modeling and simulation. We were doing it in the traditional way. Why should or how should we adopt modeling and simulation? And I think that's where platforms like MDIC or collaborative project between FDA industry, like the Living Heart projects and so on, or enrichment project makes a lot more sense to increase the awareness and adoption.
So are you directly giving advice to companies to pursue this strategy?
We have a very robust steering committee at MDIC for modeling and simulation, which includes experts from FDA, industry, and so on. And we very actively communicate, share thoughts, strategies, and we have very specific projects in very specific areas. So as you know, the landscape report is one aspect that our group has put forward, which we'll be doing on a periodic basis. But there are other projects as well, which we are promoting. Now, let me give one another example, a recent project. I actually mentioned developing models for industry or a specific model, computational model suitable for a specific industry or a specific case can be expensive. But that model might be already available out there in the public domain because federal entities like National Institute of Health, NIH, or DARPA, or National Science Foundation, NSF, probably they're all funding a lot of academic researchers to develop various models. Now, those models are available out there, but industry is not necessarily connected with that publicly available models. Sometimes it's not even sure whether they are matching or not for the industry needs. So the steering committee recently, so our steering committee has got folks from NIH and FDA and industry, as I mentioned. We came up with this idea. We need some kind of assessment to match industry needs for modeling and simulation with what's out there in the public domain. So there is it's a multifaceted approach. So we are going to do an industry assessment. What models do you need for your current line of work? And then we are going to compare it with the publicly funded models available there, from NIH or NSF and so on. Now, that results are going to say, for NIH, you guys are funding these areas, phenomenal, really good models, but these models needs to be validated and qualified to meet up with FDA requirements or industry requirements. So let's do some additional work on some areas. And in some cases, we can say, hey, we need a lot of orthopedic models. NIH is not funding. There is a mismatch. So you can change your funding strategy. So that's feedback information. And in the process, industry is going to find out the models which are almost matured or close to maturity, and some things which can be validated and so on. So that's the one process. And in the process, FDA can also find out, all right, there is a model which many companies probably can utilize. Let's validate and qualify this particular model using the MDDT mechanism, medical device development tool mechanism, so that this is widely available. So that can increase the adoption, reduce the cost, for companies who wanted to, utilize a specific model or a specific data set. So that's a recent project from MDIC. So we are in that phase where we are asking industry manufacturers to provide their needs through an assessment survey. And then in the next phase, we'll start curating the models that's out there in the public domain and doing all this matching and making it broadly accessible.
So very often, the medical device industry trails other industries in adopting new approaches and new technologies. How is computer modeling catching on in other industries? Is it used more broadly? And if it continues to be used more broadly in other industries, will that sort of pull along medical devices and increase interest in this industry?
Absolutely. I think, other industries, they are much ahead of medical device industry, whether it is automotive, aerospace, and aviation sector. Now, what I have seen in the recent years, medical device industry is bringing experts from other sectors as their subject matter expert to drive in the internal process or internal strategy. Then on the other side, regulatory frameworks need to be revisited or reassessed, which is happening. So, but that's a slightly slower process. Now, here is where MDIC is, playing a significant role. Usual cases, FDA is in this catching up game, right? There are more and more technological advancement. Companies their product development is at a higher pace compared to where the regulatory framework is. Now, doesn't mean that the company should not be able to or will not be able to submit and get the marketing approval, but that can be a one-to-one process, a long, laborious process. But when we see there is a lot of movement in the field, then MDIC can play a role in bringing the stakeholders together and coming up with some kind of best practices. It can be as simple as like this. How do we even write the description of a model and submit to FDA? What is the best way to do that? That can significantly reduce the review time, from regulatory bodies and so on. So I think there is no lack of examples from other sectors that we can leverage. It has been demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt. It just the cultural shift, the historical perspective, and then the way the products are approved through the regulatory frameworks, not only in US, across the globally, that needs to be slightly changed. But that's happening right now with pandemic situation and advancements in the field. We are seeing more movements, whether it is best practice frameworks or standards or actual guidance in the field. So it's clearly right track right now in terms of adoption.
All right. Well, it's exciting stuff. Thank you for sharing your insights and for joining us in the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
All right, Chris Newmarker, that is a wrap. Where can folks find you on LinkedIn?
Hey, you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a new marker.
I'm on LinkedIn, Tom, Salemi, still kind of on Twitter at MedTechTom, but not so much. What do we want folks to do with this podcast,
Hey,
Chris Newmarker?
You got to like, follow, subscribe.
Absolutely. Like, follow, and or subscribe to the Device Talks Podcast Network. You will receive future episodes of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast, the Intuitive Talks Podcast, the Stryker Talks Podcast, the Boston Scientific Talks Podcast. We just dropped episode 2 yesterday. If you were a subscriber, you would have received that. And coming up in June, we should have the Abbott Talks Podcast. So, and we've got discussions with many other names that you would recognize. So don't miss out on that. And Device Talks Boston, happening on May 10th and 11th. We've kind of referenced it throughout, so I don't need to tell you anything more about it other than you can use the code DTWeekly25.
Oh, there we go.
Save 25% off the price of registration.
Fantastic.
Registration is very strong, but we want to see everyone there. So please don't delay. Make sure you're there. It's going to be a nice time in Boston. It's going to be a great 2 days to connect, to build your networks, to build your knowledge. And hopefully to meet Chris and myself. It'd be great to say hello to folks who are listening to the podcast.
I know last year it was just awesome. People I was able to catch up with and talk, and it's great just to see so many people in person. I'm just excited.
I am too. I can't wait to stand up on that stage and welcome everybody the morning of May 10th. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Be awesome.
And of course, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Dassault Systèmes, for sharing this great information about the Virtual Twin program. And we look forward to their conversation on May 10th at Device Talks Boston.
All right.
And of course, we have our final Device Talks Tuesdays with Intertech of the spring season. Will be this Tuesday at 4 p.m. And then we'll resume Device Talks Tuesdays late May 30th will be the beginning of our summer season. So
fantastic.
Don't forget Device Talks Tuesdays.
Take care, everybody. Summer is on the way.
Glad to hear it.